significant emphasis placed on cyber threats. Job mismatch issues to be solved in line with industry needs. Good evening, Assalamualaikum Malaysia Madani. You're watching Malaysia Tonight. I'm Brenda Lepol. The government is placing significant emphasis on cyber security threats, especially related to information leakage, cybercrime, technological vulnerabilities and hacktivism. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim said these threats have undermined the well-being of individuals and the stability of the country's critical infrastructure and businesses. He said cybersecurity threats are also capable of destroying the reputation of organizations and causing financial losses, indirectly impacting the economy and the well-being of the country and the people. Datuk Seri Anwar made these remarks in his speech, which was read out by Defence Minister Datuk Seri Muhammad Hassan at the launch of the Capacity Development Programme and Public Dialogue on Cybersecurity Bill today.
Ruang maya merupakan domain baharu keselamatan dan geopolitik negara. Pelaku negara ataupun bukan negara, iaitu state and non-state actors, merupakan pelbagai mekanisme untuk melemahkan keselamatan negara tanpa perlu menyerang secara fizikal dan hanya melalui serangan maya sahaja. Penjenayah cyber ini sentiasa berusaha mencari ruang mengeksploit setiap kelemahan sistem, aplikasi ataupun teknologi untuk mencapai kepentingan dan memperolehi keuntungan.
Today, exactly 1 year since Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim assumed office as the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and the nation reflects on the remarkable journey of transformation led by this charismatic and visionary leader. Over the past year, Datuk Seri Anwar's leadership has brought about substantial changes, reforms and positive impacts across Malaysian society. Nurhiza Hidayu Zainul has the details.
Datuk Seri Anwar's commitment to social justice and inclusivity led to numerous reforms aimed at enhancing the lives of every citizen. He implemented policies to bridge the income gap, providing support to lower income groups, improving access to quality education and enabling comprehensive healthcare schemes.
I think issues like income disparity, we see that the Minister of Economy, Rafizi Ramli, will come up with a national progressive wage policy, right, at the end of this month. So I think everyone is looking forward to that. The issue of cost of living is also multifaceted, right? So it has to do with wages, but it also has to do with the global uncertainty and the global market that affects our currency. So so I think he probably needs to focus on problems that he can tackle domestically. So I think with the progressive wage policy, hopefully some of these issues can be tackled.
Datuk Seri Anwar's tenure as the Prime Minister was marked by a resolute stand against corruption. He reinforced transparency in governance and strengthened the rule of law.
But I think from my perspective, there are some movements on the institutional reforms, the key institutional reforms that Malaysia needs. For example, on the separation of the Attorney General's role from the public prosecutor, which has been a big issue since I think Datuk Sri Najib's case back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So the issue of the separation of the AG's role has become a very important issue. Ideas, we have been invited with other CSOs such as Bersih to present our proposal to the Parliamentary Select Committee that's in charge of institutional reforms. And this has been very encouraging for us. So at least there's a first step. So we hope that there will be a follow-up on that.
Under Datuk Sri Anwar's leadership, Malaysia experienced a significant boost in economic growth. Through strategic policies, he focused on attracting foreign investments, promoting entrepreneurship, and unleashing the potential of a nation's innovative industries.
Malaysia, I think under Datuk Sri Anwar's premiership, I think has had a probably a more positive image, I would say, internationally. Datuk Sri Anwar has also been travelling a lot, bringing the country's agenda. So, yeah, I think his personality is quite appealing to many international actors, and of course Malaysia as a Muslim majority nation that is situated in the crossroads of global trade and commerce will always play an important role.
As Malaysia reflects on the first-year anniversary of Datuk Sri Anwar's leadership, the nation stands united in recognising the remarkable achievements that have laid the foundation for a brighter future. The nation moves forward with renewed hope, guided by the vision and transformative leadership of Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim.
Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Sri Dr. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi has called on all parties to continue working hard to ensure all the unity government's plans can come to fruition and benefit the people. The Deputy Premier, who is also the Rural and Regional Development Minister, made the call through a post on Facebook in conjunction with the first anniversary of the Unity Government administration today. Datuk Sri Dr. Ahmad Zahid also shared some of the achievements of the Unity Government in the past year, including successfully hosting the 15th World Halal Business Conference in the United Kingdom to strengthen Malaysia's position as a leader in the global halal industry. In addition, the Malaysian Islamic Development Department achieved its 23-day halal certification process compared to the previous application period of over 2 years. The Unity Government also approved an allocation of 63.75 million ringgit, which benefits 318,642 rubber smallholders, as well as empowers the appreciation of Islam and the knowledge of the Quran through the Kemas Pre-Tafiz program, which aims to produce a total of 100,000 young hufas, or memorizers of the Quran, by 2026. The Ministry of Human Resources is committed to addressing job mismatch issues in accordance with the industry needs, particularly among graduates from higher education institutions. Deputy Human Resources Minister Datuk Mustafa Sakmud said various initiatives were undertaken by agencies under his ministry, including through various career carnival programs, the Career Development Program for workers in the informal sector, and the continuation of targeted wage incentive program. He said several agencies such as Talent Corp are also actively conducting programs in universities nationwide to create profiles that align with industry requirements.
Yang kita dapat lihat, memang kerja tu banyak, kerja yang ditawarkan banyak. Cuma isunya sekarang ini, graduan yang kita lahirkan tidak padan dengan yang apa permintaan industri. Jadi itu sebenarnya. Jadi itu yang kita di bawah kementerian ini kita cuba untuk kita padankan. Saya pikir peringkat universiti pun sudah mula sudah supaya apapun yang kita buat sekarang ini mesti dipacu oleh industri. Jadi kita tahu apa yang diperlukan industri di luar sana.
The Department of Statistics Malaysia, DOSM, said Malaysia's leading index, or LI, improved to negative 0.3% by recording 109.3 points in September, compared to negative 0.5%, anticipating a healthier economic prospect in the near future. LI is a tool utilized for predicting economic trends 4 to 6 months ahead. Looking at the smooth long-term trend in September, DOSM anticipated the LI to remain below the 100-point trend, and the economy is expected to grow moderately, supported by encouraging local demand amid currency challenges and the world economic slowdown. Chief Statistician Datuk Seri Dr. Muhammad Uzair Mahidin said the Bursa Malaysia Industrial Index 20.8% and the number of housing units approved 17.6% contributed positively to the airline. Referring to the monthly performance, the airline recorded a negative 0.4% in the reference month, as against 0.7% in the preceding month, owing to unfavorable performance in the real imports of other basic precious and other non-ferrous metals and the number of new companies registered. In terms of the current economic scenario, DOSM said the coincident index rose by 2.1% to 123.8 points in September this year, compared to 121.2 points in the same month the previous year. And on another note, Datuk Seri Dr. Muhammad Uzair said Malaysia's headline inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index or CPI, moderated to 1.8% in October this year, the lowest since April 2021, with the CPI at 130.9 points against 128.6 in the same month a year ago. He said the rise was driven by a lower increase in the food and non-alcoholic beverages group at 3.6% against 3.9% in September this year, the furnishings, household equipment and routine household maintenance group at 1.4%, and miscellaneous goods and services at 2.3% against 2.5% the previous month. Elaborating further through a statement released today, Datuk Seri Dr. Muhammad Uzair said that the food and non-alcoholic beverages group contributed 29.5% to the total CPI rate. Meanwhile, October's core inflation, which includes food and energy, increased slower at 2.4%, but surpassed the overall national inflation rate of 1.8%, with the highest increase recorded in food and non-alcoholic beverages at 4.8%. Malaysia's October headline inflation is lower than the Philippines, which is at 4.9%, South Korea 3.8%, Vietnam 3.6%, and Indonesia's 2.6%. And in other news, His Majesty Yang di-Pertuan Agong Al-Sultan Abdullah Riyatuddin Al-Mustafa Billah Shah today launched a mission to deliver essential items to forward bases in the Mukim Hulu Tembeling, Pahang, in preparation for the monsoon season. His Majesty flagged off 5 boats, a lorry and 2 four-wheel drive vehicles loaded with 19 tons of food items to be delivered to 6 forward bases in the area. 19 forward bases in Jerantut will store 44 tons of dry food items in preparation for the northeast monsoon season in the state. Earlier, Al-Sultan Abdullah performed Friday prayers at Kampung Kuala Sat Mosque along with the villagers and presented assistance to 150 asnaf. The king also visited the homes of several social welfare department aid recipients in the village and handed over his personal contribution as well as donations from the Pahang, Islamic Religious and Malay Customs Council. Four-day Israel-Hamas truce takes effect. That and more coming up in our foreign segment. The 4-day humanitarian pause between the Israeli army and Hamas came into effect on Friday morning in all areas of the Gaza Strip, temporarily stopping attacks for prisoner exchange and aid. The truce began at 7 a.m. local time, involving a comprehensive ceasefire in North and South Gaza, the release of 13 hostages by the Hamas group, and aid to flow into the besieged enclave. A number of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli prisons were to be freed in exchange. Additional aid would start flowing into Gaza, and the first hostages will be freed at 4 p.m. local time, with the number rising to 50 over the 4 days. Fuel trucks were also entering the Rafah crossing once the truce was underway. Egypt has said 130,000 litres of diesel and 4 trucks of gas will be delivered daily to Gaza when the truce starts, and that 200 trucks of aid would enter the city daily. Fighting had raged on in the hours leading up to the truce, with officials inside the enclave saying a hospital in Gaza City was among the targets bombed. The Indonesian hospital was reeling under relentless bombing, operating without light and filled with bedridden old people and children, too weak to be moved. Both sides also signaled the pause would be temporary before fighting resumes. In a related development, Prime Minister Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim said the 4-day ceasefire brings only some relief as the Palestinians are still up against a brutal regime who had openly said that they would continue with their attacks.
Dia melegakan sedikit, tetapi kita berhadapan dengan rejim yang ganas yang buat kenyataan bahawa mereka akan meneruskan kegiatan keganasan mereka sesuai itu memang sangat membimbangkan kita.
Dato Sri Anwar said this after attending the Friday prayers at Surau Al-Furqan in Putrajaya today. Commenting on the aspect of the humanitarian assistance for Palestine, the Premier said Malaysia is open to sending anything including aid of volunteers during the ceasefire.
Terserah kepada keputusan bersama. Kita terbuka nak hantar apapun kita setuju, cuma tertakluk kepada persetujuan kita dengan negara Arab, dengan negara Islam, terutama jiran di sekitar Palestin.
China will temporarily exempt citizens from Malaysia, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Spain from needing visas when visiting the world's second-largest economy in a fresh move to spur post-pandemic tourism. From 1st December this year to 30th November next year, citizens from those countries entering China for business, tourism, sightseeing, visiting relatives and friends, or transiting for no more than 15 days will not need a visa. China has been taking steps in recent months, including restoration of international flight routes, to revive its tourism sector following 3 years of strict COVID-19 measures that largely shut its borders to the outside world. Beijing is also looking to re-establish its global image after clashing with many Western nations, including some European countries, on issues from COVID-19 and human rights to Taiwan and trade practices. And now we move on to the next segment of our bulletin, On the Table with Mohana Priya. Over to you.
Hello and good evening. Cervical cancer is the third most common cancer among women in Malaysia and is the easiest gynecological cancer to prevent with regular pap smears and HPV vaccinations. On the table tonight, we speak to Associate Professor Dr. Muralidharan Munisamy, Managing Director of the National Cancer Society Malaysia, NCSM, about leaving no one behind in the fight to get all eligible young girls vaccinated. Welcome to the program, Doctor.
Thank you, and always a pleasure to be with you guys this evening.
Thank you. Now, Doctor, I'd like to start with a recent briefing which you conducted for parliamentarians just yesterday with the campaign Leaving No One Behind, Eliminating Cervical Cancer in Malaysia. Tell us about this initiative and how NCSM plays a role in this.
Okay. So, as you very well pointed out, cervical cancer is something we can prevent. And the government of Malaysia has actually been quite, proactive in doing this. Mm-hmm. Since 2010, we actually started a national immunization program. Yeah. And in that immunization program, we give HPV vaccines to girls in secondary schools, 13-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Now, due to the pandemic, that has been disrupted a little bit. So the government is actually going to start up on a catch-up program. Okay. But what also kind of, and this is also on the background of our whole COVID-19 vaccination process, mm-hmm. we actually realized that in these big vaccination programs, there's always a lot of people who are often not in the mainstream, and they often get left behind.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so for example, I told you the government program for HPV vaccination happens in secondary schools. Okay. But quite a significant number of Malaysian girls who actually don't go to secondary schools. One. And some of them, it's because they drop out. Okay. Okay, in primary school. Okay. These are a group of young women. The other is people who are ill. And they're often at home, people with special needs. And also there's a very, even if you looked at it that way, mm-hmm. there's even a population of our young women who are in prisons. Okay. And and of course people who are living in very rural and remote areas, yes. Our orang asal, our orang asli. Mm-hmm. So these are populations of Malaysians mm-hmm. who still will get cervical cancer if they're infected. Correct. And just because of certain social, economic circumstances, they actually fall out of the program. Mm. So it's like they unwittingly will never get the benefit of the vaccination.
Okay. So this initiative is a complementary program to the government.
Absolutely. So
how does NCSM play a role?
Okay. So and we realized this during the COVID-19 vaccination program. So while the government ran big PPVs together with different industries and all that, we realized that somebody had to actually go house to house and vaccinate your special needs populations, the people who are living in rural, very remote areas. They find it difficult to come out and all that. And so that's exactly what we did during COVID-19. We're planning to do exactly the same thing.
Okay.
What the National Cancer Society will do is we pledge to actually go out to these communities, to these individuals, if necessary, house to house, and to these remote populations all across Malaysia. In our 13 states and 3 federal territories, and actually make sure these people who are left behind, they actually don't get left behind anymore. We're going to make sure they get vaccinated.
Right. And this is done through the NCSM volunteers, or is it going to be state by state? What's the operations like?
So we're actually going to do it in every single district all across the country.
Okay.
What's also very interesting is NCSM, as you know, is a NGO, and we're largely volunteer driven.
Yes.
And we have a couple of thousand volunteers, though we always welcome more and more volunteers. There's always this thing that Malaysians always coming together to help everyone.
Okay.
So we will literally turun padang into every single district, every single kampung to actually get it done.
Okay. So, Doctor, you spoke about girls who are left out of the system, right? And B40, vulnerable groups being left out, and the mainstream program is running through the schools. So besides B40 vulnerable groups and the people who are at home, who are ill, how would you identify these groups, and are there any other groups that might be left out? Even before COVID, I'm sure this was already happening pre-COVID, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you're absolutely right. I think this has been a perennial problem, and we're figuring out this doesn't just happen. Vaccination happens to so many other programs, including like welfare programs and all that. There are always these groups who will always be left behind. So
falling
you need
through
to
the cracks and the gaps.
Absolutely. So you need to really put a lot more effort, a lot more resources to actually pay special attention to make sure that we are bringing them on board as well. So how are we going to identify them?
Yes.
It's very interesting, because traditionally and you would just through mainstream media put out like calls and all that, and people show up, right? But with these
but media
groups,
is fragmented today.
Absolutely.
Right? We don't just have mainstream media. We've got
we have social media and all this.
It makes life a little bit complicated, I think.
Absolutely. But sad, but a lot of these groups actually don't have access.
That's right.
So I remember, just to tell you a little anecdote, there was this one family that we went to vaccinate in Kuala Selangor, not all that rural, right? And we were trying to find directions to their house to vaccinate their one family member who was very ill, and it took us almost 2.5 hours. And the reason was, we take it for granted that you just share a location on Google. And finally, when we went there, this guy's actually having a 3310 phone. So, you know, the people are still in this pocket of socioeconomic status. Right. So to them, we can't go this way. So we're going to work through community NGOs.
Yes, I was about to ask that. You've always emphasized on health communications. I've noticed that you've placed tremendous emphasis on that. So why is it important that we go through, take a bottoms-up approach through community NGOs? Who else?
Community NGOs. So in the districts, usually there'll be MPs officers, ADUN's officers, who people go to them for like health, welfare, assistance, and welfare department as well.
Okay.
So these will be agencies or institutions that have connections to these people. They're already serving these people in other capacities.
Right.
So then it's easier for them to identify these groups of people.
Okay.
But also we will be going through religious organizations, we'll be going through local community like your jawatan kuasa in the kampung, your village cultural organizations, basically everyone who we know who's on the ground, working with or helping out this underprivileged or vulnerable communities.
And who have a database that will complement everything else, and hopefully nobody gets left behind.
Absolutely. So we're going to try our best. So which is why this is a district-based approach.
Okay.
We go into a district, we actually will run programs to educate people first, and even education in health is always in the English language, right? So like this one, we're actually going to run it in whatever dialect that we need to run it.
Yes.
For example, in Sabah and Sarawak, we'll actually work on building content that is driven in local languages, local dialects, and making sure that we actually get all these messages across. And then while we're working in the community, we work to find these groups of people and then work to vaccinate them.
Okay. Now, Dr. NCSM has been doing work to educate, support and care for all types of cancer patients. In your opinion, what does the country need right now the most when it comes to care and support of patients living with cancer or who have recovered from cancer?
I think it's still a lot of community coming together. So we often, like in things like cancer, we talk about, we need like big things, we need like multi-million-dollar systems and all that. But actually a lot of solutions require everybody putting a little bit together. One person coming to volunteer one day.
Right.
People putting forth 10 ringgit to help somebody else, paying for a little part of a medication. Some people helping people who come from rural areas to get treatment in cities, offering them a place to stay, offering your relatives a place to stay when they come to get checkups. It's all these little things that will add up for us as a society to help our people who are in need.
Okay, and I really hope you get that when in your initiative and rollout. Now, Dr. Murali, you specialize in public health. Is there a link between COVID and cancer? What are the studies showing? Okay, so this is really, I've beaten people up enough about this, and because the problem is, there is a lot of, I would use the word cerita dongeng, where people actually think that the COVID vaccination has driven cancer. So interestingly, in March, April this year, there's a set of big papers that are actually showing correlation between people who have got COVID and they've actually had early onset of cancer versus people who actually had the vaccine and actually had reduced risk of cancer. Oh, that's interesting. So rather than the story being COVID vaccination causing cancer, it's actually the reverse. What about COVID itself, the disease itself?
So exactly, so it's people who had COVID without good protective cover for vaccination, they are actually showing, the data are showing very strong correlation to them actually picking up cancer.
It's not the vaccine, nothing to do with the vaccine.
Absolutely.
Okay, is there still vaccine hesitancy though when it comes to HPV?
Quite a bit, and you spoke to this earlier. You say, why are we pushing health comps?
Yeah.
Because we think, I sincerely hope we're wrong, but we're thinking, and globally that's the kind of pattern showing, there's a bit more vaccine hesitancy today. In all vaccines after this whole COVID
incident.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, which is why we're pushing out health communications in a big way to get people maybe reintroduced, reorientated, a bit more aware to HPV vaccines, which has been in Malaysia for more than 20 years. Yeah. Millions of women have been vaccinated, doing fine. In fact, we're showing nationally there's a drop in the prevalence of the oncogenic, these high-risk types which are causing cervical cancer. That amount has actually come down. So it's really good results of vaccination.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Murali, for your time today and your insights. I think people will benefit from this, and we really wish you all the best with the rollout of your initiative.
Absolutely. I'm just going to end on one note. If people need to find out more, please go to hpv@cancer.org.my. And well, please feel hpv@cancer.org.my.
Okay. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Pleasure.
And that wraps up On the Table tonight. It's now back to you.
Thank you, Mohana. Our sincere appreciation to Dr. Muralidharan for the insights and clarity. Thank you, Doctor. And that wraps up Malaysia Tonight. I'm Brenda Lepal, together with Mohana Priya. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thanks for watching. Take care.